The number stared back at me from the bank statement. $200,000. A loan. But I'd never seen this loan before in my life. My reading glasses slipped down my nose as I squinted at the document again, hoping the morning light through my small kitchen window was playing tricks on me. The envelope still lay torn open beside my coffee cup, the First National Bank letterhead crisp and official. Everything looked legitimate. My name, my address, even what appeared to be my signature at the bottom. But I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't applied for any loan. My hands trembled slightly as I turned the paper over, searching for some explanation, some fine print that would make sense of this nightmare. The loan origination date showed March 1st, 2025, just 2 weeks ago. Monthly payments of $10,147 were already overdue. I needed answers. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. The phone felt heavier than usual as I dialed the customer service number printed at the top of the statement. Each ring echoed in my quiet apartment, amplifying the growing knot in my stomach. First National Bank Customer Service. This is Jennifer. How may I assist you today? Yes, I'm calling about a loan that appears on my account. Robert Anderson, account ending in 4729. Of course, Mr. Anderson. Let me pull up your file. I heard the soft click of keyboard keys. I see the personal loan for $200,000 was approved on March 1st. Is there something specific you need help with? The room seemed to tilt slightly. There must be some mistake. I never applied for this loan. A pause. Sir, I'm showing the application was submitted online with your social security number and digital signature verification. The funds were deposited into your checking account on March 2nd. That's impossible. My voice cracked slightly. I never received any deposit. My account balance has been the same for months. Let me check something else. Oh, I see. Jennifer's professional tone shifted. The funds were transferred to a joint account holder the same day, Brian Anderson. My son's name hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles turning white against the black plastic. Mr. Anderson, are you still there? Yes, I whispered. Can you tell me more about this transfer? The entire loan amount was moved to Mr. Brian Anderson's personal account within hours of the deposit. She continued, her voice now laced with careful procedure. He's listed as an authorized user on your account from, let me see, 5 years ago when you added him for emergency purposes. The walls of my small apartment felt like they were closing in. Brian. I trusted him completely. Added him after his mother died so he could help with my banking if I ever became ill. Sir, is everything all right? Do you need to report fraudulent activity? My mouth went dry. Fraudulent activity. My own son. He had stolen from me, forged my signature, taken out a massive loan in my name. $200,000 that I would never be able to repay on my small pension. Mr. Anderson, I need to call you back. I hung up before she could respond, my hand shaking as I set the phone down. The silence in my apartment felt deafening, broken only by the ticking of the old clock on my kitchen wall. The 27-minute drive to Brian's house felt like hours. My old Honda struggled up the hill toward Manito Park, where my son lived in a neighborhood I could never afford. His house sat behind a perfectly manicured lawn, complete with professional landscaping and a circular driveway. 2 cars occupied the space, a new BMW and a Mercedes SUV, both worth more than my annual pension. I parked on the street and walked up the stone pathway, the loan document folded in my jacket pocket. The doorbell chimed with an expensive melody. Dad. Brian opened the door. What are you doing here? You should have called first. We need to talk, I said, stepping past him without an invitation. Rich hardwood floors stretched beneath my feet, leading to a living room that looked like something from a magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows, leather furniture, art that actually looked valuable. Brian closed the door slowly, his face showing signs of nervousness. Is everything okay? You seem upset. I got something interesting in the mail today. I pulled out the bank statement, watching his eyes focus on the official letterhead. Care to explain this? His face went pale instantly. Dad, I don't know what that is. $200,000, Brian. A loan I never applied for with a signature that looks remarkably like mine. The bank confirmed the funds went directly to your account within hours. There must be some mistake. His voice cracked. Banks make errors all the time. Stop lying to me. My voice came out harder than I intended. I spoke to customer service. They confirmed you're listed as an emergency contact with account access. You forged my signature and stole $200,000. Finally, his shoulders sagged in defeat. Dad, you have to understand. Emily has expectations. She's used to a certain lifestyle, and I couldn't disappoint her. Help? The word came out as a whisper. This isn't help, Brian. This is theft. This is fraud. But you're not using that credit anyway, he argued. You live so simply, and Emily needs. Brian, what's all the shouting about? Emily appeared at the top of the staircase like she was making a grand entrance. Designer workout clothes, perfectly styled hair, jewelry that caught the morning light. She descended slowly, her tone suggesting I was something unpleasant she'd found on her shoe. Oh, Robert, you're here. Emily, I nodded stiffly. Your husband and I were just discussing a loan he took out in my name. She reached the bottom of the stairs and slipped her arm through Brian's. Robert, honestly, you're making such a fuss over nothing. You're going to die soon anyway. Why do you need that money? The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood there staring at this woman who had just casually dismissed my remaining years as worthless. Brian's face showed shock, but he didn't contradict her, didn't defend me. Something cold settled in my chest, replacing the hot anger. I folded the loan document carefully and put it back in my pocket. When I looked up, both of them were watching me with the weariness of people who suddenly realized they might have pushed too far. You're right, Emily. My voice came out calm, almost pleasant. I probably don't have many years left. Brian straightened, taking confidence from his wife's cruelty. Dad, you need to understand something here. You raised me to expect support from family. That's what parents do. He paced across their expensive floors. All those years you promised you'd always be there for me. Remember, you said family comes first, no matter what. The years of working 2 shifts at the bank to cover his college expenses flashed through my mind. Parents sacrifice for their children, not the other way around, Emily added, her arm sliding around his waist. That's just natural order. I remembered the $15,000 I'd scraped together from my retirement for their wedding. And honestly, Dad, you should be grateful we're giving you this opportunity, Brian said. How many retired people get to feel useful? The manipulation was so complete, so perfectly crafted, I almost admired its artistry. They had taken my love for my son and weaponized it against me. So, what's it going to be, Dad? Brian demanded. Are you going to support your family, or are you going to be selfish about money you don't even need? I looked at them both, standing in their beautiful house, living a life built on the foundation of my destroyed financial security. something settled deep in my chest, cold and final as winter ice. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was a financial crime, and I was going to handle it like one. Monday morning brought 3 urgent envelopes from First National Bank. Default notice, collection procedures, foreclosure warning. I'd spent the weekend replaying their words, but I'd also been thinking like a banker, analyzing the situation with 40 years of professional experience. At 9:30, I walked the 6 blocks to the bank, the same building where I'd worked for most of my adult life. Margaret Wells, the branch manager, was professional but firm. "As co-signer, you're responsible for the entire balance," she said, her voice carrying genuine sympathy. I left the bank and walked home slowly, my decision made. The next day, I started making calls. My first was to Elizabeth Dunn, an old colleague now at Commerce Bank. We met for coffee. "Robert Anderson." "Well, this is a pleasant surprise," she said warmly. I slid a copy of the loan application across the table. "My son applied for this, using me as a co-signer. I never signed it." Elizabeth studied it with a practiced eye. "Robert, I have to tell you something. Your son has applied here several times in the past year. We declined them due to inconsistencies. Our handwriting analysis flagged some concerns about signature authenticity. Multiple banks. This wasn't a one-time crime. It was systematic fraud." My pen moved steadily across a fresh legal pad. By that afternoon, I was in Tom Rodriguez's office at Inland Empire Credit Union. Tom had worked fraud investigation for 15 years. "Robert, what I'm seeing here fits a pattern we've been tracking," he said, turning his computer screen toward me. "These credit reports show applications at 4 different banks over the past 18 months. He printed several pages and handed them to me. "These documents show systematic identity theft spanning over a year. Brian hadn't just stolen from me. He'd built an entire criminal enterprise around stealing my identity." That evening, I organized everything chronologically. Applications denied, small loans approved, the escalating pattern that led to the $200,000 score at my former employer. But something nagged at me. Several applications showed a co-applicant I didn't recognize, someone named Marcus Webb, with a signature that looked remarkably similar to Emily's handwriting. My phone rang. It was Elizabeth Dunn. "Robert, I made those calls," she said, her voice low. "You need to know something about your daughter-in-law. Emily Anderson has been very busy at several banks around town." I picked up my pen and opened to a fresh page in the legal pad. The puzzle was getting bigger and much, much darker. Friday morning at 11, I parked 3 blocks from Brian's house with a thermos of coffee and my old digital camera. Elizabeth's call had given me what I needed, specifics about Emily's activities, always accompanied by someone named Marcus Webb. 40 years of methodical thinking doesn't disappear just because the subjects are family. Emily emerged at 11:47, driving the Mercedes purchased with stolen money. First stop, Nordstrom. I watched from the food court as she examined expensive men's watches. She selected a Tag Heuer. The price tag, visible through my camera's zoom lens, showed $2,247, nearly twice my monthly income, spent casually on someone who definitely wasn't her husband. I documented everything. Emily at the register, credit cards in hand, bags being loaded into the car. At 2:30, she drove to Zio's, an expensive Italian restaurant downtown. He was already waiting at a corner table, mid-30s, well-dressed, handsome. When she approached, he stood and kissed her. Not a polite kiss, but the intimate embrace of lovers. She made a show of presenting the watch, fastening it around his wrist. My camera captured everything through the restaurant window, their intimate conversation, her hands on his face. This was a full relationship funded entirely by stolen money. "This watch costs more than most people make in months," I heard her say as they stepped outside. His response was equally telling. "You spoil me too much, but I'm not complaining about the lifestyle upgrade. My life savings transformed into another man's luxury." They moved to the hotel bar at the Davenport, where she ordered expensive champagne. "My husband's family will never know where this money really goes," Emily said, raising her glass. "To financial freedom." "Marcus, it had to be Marcus Webb," replied, "and stupid men who make it possible." I took one final photograph, her wedding ring clearly visible as she caressed her lover's face. The surveillance photos were the perfect capstone to my investigation. But Brian hadn't just victimized me. I was certain of it. The next morning, I called Linda Martinez, Brian's neighbor for 5 years, a widow on Social Security. "Robert, Brian's told me so much about you. How are you feeling? He said you'd been having some health issues," she said. Another lie. Another manipulation. We met for coffee. I showed her the loan documents. Her face went through the same progression I'd experienced: confusion, recognition, then burning anger. "He told me you were sick and needed help, but were too proud to ask," she said, her voice cracking. "Said if I co-signed a car loan for him, he'd use the money to pay your medical bills. $18,000. The car was repossessed last month, and now they're saying I owe the full balance." She trusted him because he was my son. Linda provided 3 more names, other people Brian had approached with similar stories. By Tuesday afternoon, I was sitting in the law office of Patricia Stone, a fraud prosecutor who'd left the DA's office to handle cases exactly like this one. The conference table was covered with documentation from 5 different victims. "Mr. Anderson, in 20 years of fraud prosecution, I've rarely seen a case this well documented," she said, reviewing my photos and records. "Individual cases are weak," she explained, "but collective evidence creates an overwhelming narrative of a deliberate criminal enterprise." The next evening, we gathered in a community center meeting room. 7 victims, all targeted by Brian. There was Tom, my old colleague, who'd lent Brian $5,000 for a fake emergency, and Sarah Williams, who'd guaranteed his apartment lease and was now facing eviction. I stood at a whiteboard, organizing the timeline. "This is a calculated criminal enterprise," I explained, "targeting elderly neighbors, family friends, professional contacts who trusted the Anderson family name. He told me his father was dying and needed experimental treatment," said Mrs. Patterson, an 80-year-old church member who'd mortgaged her home to help. The energy in the room shifted. These weren't defeated victims anymore. They were witnesses in a major criminal case. Patricia Stone took the floor. Her presence was commanding, her words sharp and precise. "What Robert has assembled here is more than just a series of unfortunate events. It's a pattern of racketeering." She looked around the room, making eye contact with each victim. "With this level of documentation, we're not just looking at civil recovery. We're looking at federal wire fraud charges, identity theft, and elder abuse." A murmur went through the room. The words "federal charges" hung in the air, heavy with consequence. Patricia nodded approvingly. "They think they're dealing with isolated, defeated victims. Instead, they're facing a coordinated coalition with comprehensive evidence and legal representation." "So, what's our next step?" Tom asked, his voice steady. I looked at the faces around me, people whose lives Brian had damaged, whose trust he'd betrayed, whose financial security he'd destroyed. Our next step, I said, my voice cold and clear, is to let them know the game is over. The plan was simple. Patricia would prepare the official filings. In the meantime, I would make one final attempt to see if my son had any shred of decency left. Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang with an urgency that cut through the quiet of my apartment. "Dad, we need to talk. Right now." Brian's voice was tight with panic. "You're making a big mistake with these people you've been calling." So he knew. Word had gotten back to him. "Don't play games with me," he snarled. "I know what you're doing. Gathering these folks, filling their heads with lies about me. It stops today." "I'll meet you at Romano's in an hour," I said calmly. "We can discuss this like adults." The restaurant was public, well lit, forcing him to moderate his behavior. He was already there, his designer shirt and expensive watch projecting a confidence his clenched jaw betrayed. "You think you're so smart," he began before I'd even sat down. "Bank records aren't stories, son," I replied quietly. "Signature analysis isn't subject to interpretation." Emily appeared, a theatrical entrance. "Robert," she said, sliding into the chair beside Brian. "I'm so glad we can finally talk this through like family." "What if we could reduce your debt by half?" Brian offered, attempting sincerity. "Would that help everyone move forward?" Reduce my debt. As if the money he'd stolen belonged to him. "I think there's something you both need to see," I said, reaching for my phone. "About how that loan money is really being spent." The first photograph filled the screen. Emily and Marcus at the restaurant, his hand on her face. Brian's face went white. "Emily, what is this? Who is that man?" I swiped. Emily fastening the watch on Marcus's wrist. Another, her hands on the suits she'd bought him. Her wedding ring glinting. "This is where your loan went, Brian." Emily's shock lasted 3 seconds before her survival instincts kicked in. "Robert, this is pathetic," she said, her voice a perfect mix of incredulity and concern. "These are obviously fake photos. Honey, don't you see what's happening?" Her hand found Brian's arm. "Your father is desperate. He's fabricated these images because he can't accept responsibility for his own financial situation." Brian looked from the phone to his wife, desperation on his face. "But Emily, that looks like... that's your watch." You've been stalking me," Emily cried, turning to Brian, her voice breaking with theatrical emotion. "This is harassment, honey. He's clearly lost his mind." I watched my son's expression and understood. Clarity meant nothing when confronted with a truth too devastating to accept. He was choosing to believe her lies. "I think this conversation is over," Emily said softly, a smile of cold satisfaction on her face. "Robert, we'll pray for your recovery." Later that night, the expensive hardwood floors of Brian's living room echoed with frantic pacing. "He knows, Brian. He knows everything." Emily's voice was sharp, stripped of its usual polished calm. "The photos, the loan applications, that old man has been building a case against us." Brian, pale and shaking, sank onto a leather sofa. "Fake photos. You said they were fake." "Of course they're not fake, you idiot," she snapped, the mask of the supportive wife dissolving completely. "Do you think I'd let you waste all that money on yourself? Marcus is an investment. But your father, he's not just some sad old pensioner. He's a professional. He thinks like they do." She stopped pacing and stared at him, her eyes glittering with a desperate, predatory light. "He has evidence, Brian. Physical evidence. We have to get it. Get it? What are you talking about? His apartment. He has that camera, notebooks, bank files, all of it. We have to destroy it. It's our only chance. Brian stared at her, horrified. Break into my father's home? He's not your father anymore, she hissed, kneeling in front of him, grabbing his hands. He's the man who is going to send you to prison. Do you want that? Do you want to lose all this? Her gesture encompassed the opulent room, the life he'd stolen to possess. He has a key, she whispered. You still have the emergency key he gave you, don't you? He nodded numbly. He'll be at that ridiculous victim meeting tomorrow night. We go in, we take everything that matters, and we burn it. It will be his word against ours. And who are they going to believe? The next evening, my small apartment felt unnervingly still as Brian's key slid into the lock. The familiar click echoed in the hallway like a gunshot. He hesitated, his hand trembling on the doorknob. Emily pushed past him impatiently. Don't lose your nerve now, she whispered harshly. Where does he keep his paperwork? They moved through the quiet space like ghosts, their shadows dancing on the walls in the dim light from the street. The apartment was a monument to a life of modesty and order, a stark contrast to their own chaotic decadence. Every item had its place, a lifetime of careful habits. It felt like sacrilege. Emily went straight for the small desk in the living room corner, rifling through drawers with cold efficiency. Brian stood frozen in the center of the room, looking at the photographs on the mantelpiece. Himself as a boy, his mother smiling, me in my prime. A wave of something, guilt maybe, washed over him, but Emily's sharp voice cut through it. Found it! She held up my yellow legal pad, its pages filled with my neat, methodical handwriting, names, dates, account numbers. This is everything. Now the camera. They found it on the kitchen table, where I'd left it after downloading the photos. Emily popped the memory card out and crushed it under her heel with a satisfying crunch. Let's go. We'll burn this trash in the barbecue pit. As they turned to leave, Brian's eyes fell on the old cuckoo clock on the wall, the one his mother had loved. For a moment, he reached for it, a flicker of sentiment in his eyes. Emily grabbed his arm. Leave it. It's worthless. They slipped out into the night, leaving the door unlocked, the silence of the apartment now holding a new, violated quality. When I returned home from the coalition meeting, a sense of unease hit me the moment I saw the door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open slowly. The apartment was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet, a disturbed quiet. My eyes swept the room. Nothing seemed out of place at first, but then I saw it. The drawer of my desk was open. My heart pounded in my chest. I rushed to the desk. The legal pad was gone. My files, neatly arranged, were in disarray. I ran to the kitchen table. The camera was there, but it felt light. I opened the memory card slot. Empty. A cold dread washed over me, quickly replaced by a white-hot fury that burned away any remaining sentiment. They had been here, in my home. They had crossed a line from which there was no return. For a moment, the violation felt absolute. They had taken my evidence, my leverage. But defeat was a luxury I couldn't afford. This act of desecration didn't break me. It forged my resolve into something harder, sharper. This was no longer about justice. It was about eradication. I picked up my phone, my hand steady, my mind clear. I dialed Patricia Stone. Patricia, it's Robert. Is everything all right? How was the meeting? They broke into my apartment. They stole my notes and destroyed the memory card with the photos. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Robert? Are you okay? I'm fine, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. But they've just declared war. It's time to accelerate everything. File the charges tomorrow morning. No more warnings, no more chances. We're done talking. Thursday morning at 9 sharp, I sat across from Patricia Stone's desk. The loss of the physical evidence from my apartment was a setback, but not a fatal one. I had backups of the photos on my computer, and my memory of the notes was perfect. Robert, this documentation is extraordinary, Patricia said, reviewing the digital files and my reconstructed timeline. I've never seen a civilian investigation this thorough. We can file criminal charges for fraud, identity theft, and financial exploitation of the elderly. By noon, the criminal fraud charges had been filed with the Spokane County District Attorney's Office, but that was only the beginning. From the courthouse, I drove to Emily's workplace, a marketing firm downtown. I walked into the reception area carrying a sealed envelope addressed to the Human Resources Director. Could you ensure Ms. Anderson's supervisor receives this immediately? I asked politely. It contains information relevant to her employment. The envelope contained pristine prints of the surveillance photographs and a professional summary explaining how company time and resources were potentially being used to facilitate criminal activity. Next, I visited the local print shop where I had prepared a small mailing project. 27 envelopes, each containing copies of the restaurant photos and a brief, factual explanation of the circumstances. The addresses included Emily's parents, her sister, her college friends, and several prominent members of her social circle. Social reputation takes years to build and minutes to destroy. My final stop was Brian's apartment complex, where I left an envelope for the building manager containing proof that his lease, guaranteed by the elderly Mrs. Patterson, was secured through fraudulent means. By Friday morning, Emily's world began collapsing with mathematical precision. Her supervisor called an emergency meeting to discuss serious allegations affecting professional conduct. Her parents left increasingly frantic voicemails demanding explanations for the disturbing photographs they'd received. 3 longtime friends blocked her on social media. Brian's panicked phone call came at 10:30. Dad, what have you done? The police want to question me about fraud charges. Emily's been suspended from work pending investigation. People are saying terrible things about us. I've done exactly what any fraud victim should do, Brian, I replied calmly. Seek justice through proper legal channels. This is insane. You're destroying our lives over money. No, Brian. You destroyed your lives when you chose to steal from your father and 7 other people. I'm simply ensuring appropriate consequences. Emily called an hour later, her voice cracking with a desperation I'd never heard before. Robert, please, you have to stop this. I'm going to lose my job. My family thinks I'm some kind of criminal. This is destroying everything I've worked for. You should have considered those consequences before you decided to fund your affair with stolen money, I said. What do you want? She sobbed. What will it take to make you stop? And I want you to experience exactly what you put 7 elderly people through, I said quietly. Financial insecurity, social embarrassment, and the complete destruction of the life you thought was secure. That's cruel, she whispered. Yes, I said. It is. The pressure was working, but Emily was a cornered animal, and cornered animals are dangerous, she called Marcus. It's all falling apart, she said, her voice a frantic whisper over the phone. The old man is burying us. Brian is useless. He's going to confess to everything. That sounds like your problem, Emily. Marcus replied coolly. No, it's our problem, she insisted. There's still money, Marcus. A lot of it. In an account you know about. Help me get to it. We can disappear. Together. Just like we talked about. There was a long pause. Marcus, a man whose entire life was a calculation of risk versus reward, was doing the math. Emily was now a massive liability. Her name was toxic, connected to a sprawling fraud investigation. Helping her would be career suicide. Betraying her, however, that had potential. He saw an angle. I'll see what I can do, he said, his voice smooth and reassuring. Lay low. I'll call you. He hung up and immediately searched for a number. He found it in an old contact list from a business associate, Robert Anderson. He dialed from a burner phone. Mr. Anderson, he said when I picked up. You don't know me, but we have a mutual acquaintance in your daughter-in-law. I have information that could be very valuable to you. Information about an offshore account. In exchange, I want assurance that my name stays out of any and all legal proceedings. We met at a quiet bench in Riverfront Park, the Spokane River moving steadily eastward, indifferent to our troubles. Marcus Webb was exactly as he appeared in the photos. Polished, confident, and utterly self-serving. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. Emily is planning to run, he said, not looking at me. She's been siphoning a portion of the loan money and funds from other sources into an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. She thinks she's going to liquidate everything she can, transfer it, and be on a plane by the end of the week. He handed me a slip of paper. On it was an account number and the name of a bank. She wanted me to go with her, an expensive liability. I prefer to cut my losses. Why help me? I asked, my eyes fixed on the numbers. Let's call it a severance package, Marcus said with a thin smile. She tried to make me her accomplice and her escape plan. I don't like being used. Besides, with her out of the picture, and my name clear, the assets she was spending on me are, well, let's just say my lifestyle is secure. Your fight is with her and your son. I was just a symptom of their dysfunction. He stood up. I trust you'll know what to do with this. I'd advise you to act quickly. She's getting more desperate by the hour. He walked away without a backward glance, a man securing his own future by selling out his lovers. It was a devil's bargain, but I had no hesitation in taking it. I didn't even go home. I drove straight to Patricia Stone's office. I walked in without an appointment and placed the slip of paper on her desk. This is an offshore account where Emily has been hiding the stolen money. She's planning to flee the country. Patricia's eyes widened as she read the account number. She was on the phone within seconds, her voice a rapid-fire sequence of legal commands. Get me Judge Albright on an emergency motion. Yes, flight risk, international asset freeze. We need it executed within the hour. The information from Marcus was the final, devastating blow. It proved premeditation, a clear intent not just to defraud, but to escape with the proceeds. It transformed the case from a domestic financial crime into a serious international felony. By the end of the day, an emergency court order had frozen the Cayman Islands account. Emily's escape route had been cut off. The last nail was hammered into her coffin. She had nowhere left to run. Saturday morning, my coffee was interrupted by another call from Brian, but this time his panic was replaced by a hollow, broken anguish. Dad, Emily left me. His voice cracked. She packed her things this morning and moved out. She said you were right. She admitted everything. About Marcus, the money, all of it. Through the phone, I could hear the chaos of a life disintegrating. She said staying with me would destroy her career completely. She said Marcus has money, that he can give her the life she wants without all this legal trouble. The irony was bitter. Emily, having been cut off from her stolen funds by Marcus's betrayal, was now clinging to him, unaware he was the architect of her final downfall. Dad, I know I made terrible mistakes, but I'm your son. Please help me. The same old refrain, but the words were meaningless now. I'm coming over, he said, his voice pleading. 45 minutes later, Brian stood at my door, looking like he'd aged 5 years and 5 days. His designer clothes were wrinkled, his posture slumped in defeat. She was planning this whole thing, the loans, the money, even marrying me. It was all some scheme with Marcus, he said, sinking heavily onto my couch. I was just as much a victim as you were, still making excuses, still deflecting blame. Brian, you forged my signature. You stole money from 7 elderly people. You chose to believe her lies even when presented with photographic evidence. Those weren't things that happened to you. Those were choices you made. I was stupid. I was weak, he whispered, his eyes red-rimmed. I'll testify against her. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. The prosecution already has everything they need, I said flatly. Your cooperation wouldn't change the charges against you. Then what can I do? What will it take for you to forgive me? Forgiveness. A word used to erase consequences. You can face the consequences of your choices like an adult, I said, walking to the door and opening it. You can accept that your actions have results. The conversation is over. The family relationship is over. The only thing left now is letting the legal system finish what you started. He stood slowly, his face a mask of broken acceptance. I love you, Dad. Love without respect, loyalty, or honesty isn't love, Brian. It's just words people use when they want something. Friday morning, April the 12th, I stood on the steps of the Spokane County Courthouse wearing my best suit. Patricia Stone waited beside me, her confidence as polished as mine. Are you ready for this, Robert? She asked. I've been ready since March 15th, I replied. Inside, the coalition of victims sat in the gallery, Linda Martinez, Tom, Sarah Williams, Mrs. Patterson, and the others. They nodded as I passed, a silent acknowledgement of our shared fight. Brian sat alone at the defendant's table, his public defender shuffling through papers. He looked older, thinner, diminished. Judge Harrison entered, his presence commanding the room. Mr. Anderson, the judge addressed Brian directly. You have been charged with multiple counts of identity theft, bank fraud, and financial exploitation of elderly victims. How do you plead? Guilty, Your Honor. Brian's voice was barely a whisper, devoid of defiance or manipulation. Patricia Stone stood. Your Honor, the prosecution wishes to acknowledge the extraordinary cooperation of Mr. Robert Anderson, whose professional expertise made this prosecution possible. The defendant defrauded 7 victims of over $300,000. Judge Harrison's voice carried the weight of the law. Mr. Brian Anderson, the court sentences you to 3 years probation, 500 hours of community service, and full financial restitution to all victims. You will surrender all assets for liquidation, and your wages will be garnished until complete repayment is achieved. Full financial ruin. The systematic pressure had achieved its calculated result. Outside the courthouse, news reporters gathered. I spoke briefly, my words chosen with precision. Justice has been served through proper legal channels. The system works when citizens use it professionally and systematically. I hope this case demonstrates that financial fraud, even within families, carries serious consequences. Linda Martinez approached me as the reporters dispersed. Robert, I can never thank you enough. Without your organization, I would have lost my home. The system exists to protect people like us, Linda. We simply had to use it correctly. Driving home, I reflected on the past 8 weeks. I had entered this crisis a victim, elderly, vulnerable, betrayed. I was leaving it as something else entirely, a successful prosecutor who demonstrated that systematic thinking could triumph over emotional manipulation. Brian would spend years rebuilding his life from nothing. Emily, thanks to Marcus, had escaped criminal charges but not ruin. Her career and reputation were destroyed, her stolen nest egg inaccessible. As for me, I sat in my modest apartment that evening, reading emails from other fraud victims who had heard about our case and wanted advice. My phone rang. It was Patricia Stone, with an update on asset liquidation schedules, professional conversations about professional results. Trust, once broken, cannot be repaired. But justice, when pursued systematically, can always be achieved. The system had worked exactly as designed. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.